What's up, everyone? How's it going? Welcome to today's market analysis and trade recap session. I know today is one day late. Today is June 21st, but this is going to be the recap for yesterday's Friday, June 20th. And I do know that I have been gone for 2 weeks. I had to go take a break and essentially drive from the south side of the United States all the way to the north side. So I had some other stuff on my plate, but we should be back to these daily uploads starting from this week. So let's dive straight into this and let's talk about the two trades which I took yesterday on Friday and why they both happened to succeed. We'll also talk about the overall market session and analyze all of that as well. But today I'm really trying to take a step back and understand the true reasoning behind each and every trade alongside these levels rather than simply telling you that it's there. So having that said, let's start off and talk about the news that was there on Friday, which was yesterday. So if you look on Forex Factory, what we see is that we didn't have much high impact news that we need to worry about at all. Everything essentially ended here at 9 a.m. and at 9 a.m. the impact of that was quite low as well. So we did have a 5-minute interval here at 9 a.m. But honestly, that 5-minute interval as well is not really needed. So having the fundamental analysis set and knowing that we're essentially flatlined between greed and fear in the market, right? And that has been a heavy reason actually, that the market recently has simply just been chopping throughout this range. We haven't really been going up or down. We've just been staying within this overall range, right? And now we understand that and we know that, and there's nothing really regarding fundamental analysis that would actually change that. Now, I do believe Trump may have been speaking in the later portion of the day, which may have affected the market. I do have to recheck that. But for the time being, regarding the 20th, Friday, we're essentially just smack in between or in a long-term consolidation, which doesn't mean that we can't make good trades in the short term. So we're just looking to see where might we get higher probability trades, and that's exactly what we're looking out for. So now, if you go back onto ES, right, I'll just let you know what happened before market opened and what resulted in my buys for the day. So what we saw happening, right, we marked out all these zones and liquidity levels simply from the chart, right? What we saw happening was that we had this zone and main liquidity here. What happened was that price went up strongly into these highs right here, right? And let's take a look at what happened at these highs, right? Right around 8:30-ish, right around market open, actually. And to do that, we're going to take advantage of a footprint chart. And footprint chart has got to be one of the most powerful tools of all time. You yourself can practice this for completely free with a 15-minute delay, but taking advantage of the Addis partnership that V2 Trading has. You can take a look at that in the description down below. Even with the 15-minute delay, you can start practicing and backtesting your strategy if you're looking to integrate order flow into your strategy in the future. I do like to say that order flow is one of the most powerful tools that you can use in the markets because it gives you a sense of objectivity in the market rather than the normal subjectivity you get when looking at normal technicals. That's why it provides an edge to me, and that may differ for other people, but you need to practice it and see if it would be something that would work for you. But I highly recommend it. As always, no financial advice, do your own research. The link is in the description for this Addis charts alongside the Bookmap live stream, which we'll get into later as well. But as we see up at these highs right here around 830-ish, what we see happening is that as we come up into this level, we ticked it once before, right? We came all the way up there here at 825, and not much volume was put up there. We just went up there and simply came back down. But it's showing me that buyers were unable to push through that area, and they likely stopped having interest after a certain level, because even though price was moving up, there was not much volume, which took price back to the area where most volume is transacted. Now, as we're going up, more volume is being distributed. Now, price could easily be traded there. But now in this next candle, what we see happening is quite interesting. Look at this overall candle. We see a large amount of buyer delta here. And alongside this buyer delta, as you can see, we're seeing a large amount of volume that's being transacted within this candle. What that is telling to me, simply by looking at this candle, is that buyers and sellers are having a big fight at this area. And from what it looks like, buyers do be seeming to get the advantage, but they're unable to break through this overall area. Now, it's hard to tell that there's passive selling at this area, right? But there's lots of volume. Buyers and sellers are fighting at this area. Now, how will price react at this area? We have to make a prediction. And if you take a look on Bookmap, shout out to Alex who think with Bookmap. Great resource. I highly recommend you guys to check out. You don't need to essentially pay for Bookmap if you are fine with the 1 to 2 second delay using the live stream. Great resource. I highly recommend you guys to use. But if you go to that market open time, let's see what's going on. That's going to be the dump area, right? So what we saw going on was that price headed up here. At this area, we saw passive selling. That's simply indicated by this Bookmap heat here. And essentially what that means is that there are a lot of sell limit orders here at this price area up near these highs, around that 6070 area relatively. And lots of volume is being transacted at this area. Lots of buyers are getting in, not necessarily distributed throughout the candle, but lots of buyers are actually getting in near the top of this candle. And that being said, they're still not able to push through these highs and push through this level. We also see that around 6072, there is liquidity around that relative area as well, as you can see by the heat there. And we're essentially seeing large buying participants get in near the top. And from that, price has shot down after market open. That is showing us that this zone is a very key level for us to look for, and this has essentially validated that, right? Now, that has essentially structured our downwards bias for the day. And you may be wondering how. Well, think about it, guys. We already had this zone marked down and main liquidity. Now, we don't know if it's valid yet or not. We have to see if something reacts off of it within a recent time frame to build our bias off of something of that sort, and then carry on that movement and bias onto the next targets. And simply because we saw that absorption clearly at that area, and we saw large amounts of volume being transacted, and as you can see here, large buyers getting in right there with that big bubble, you can essentially understand and validate this zone simply because of that action that's happening there between buyers and sellers. Lots of volume, buyers are trying to get in near the top, are unable to break through, tried it once, tried it the second time, are unable to break through, push down. Same thing happened here. It's essentially just giving us insight into where selling interest came in. Now, we know that selling interest came in, but now we have to figure out where buying interest came in. And simply from our technicals, right? We know that here there's lots of consolidation, and you can validate that simply by putting up a volume profile here, right? Let's go ahead and extend that. I think that's too early. It's not what I was expecting to see, but yeah, there we go. Yeah, so essentially throughout this entire choppy range, volume has been distributed throughout this entire area. So that volume is distributed throughout the entire area. But here we're seeing volume at the top, bringing price down lower. Now here, where are typically the points where price stops, right? Think about it like this. If we had structure something like this, we are choppy here, we come up, we come down, we come up, we come down, we come up. Now we break this structure, right? We break this here. Where would you expect price to go? Would you expect, if we broke this as well, right? Would you expect price to randomly just come up and start consolidating there? Who knows, potentially that might happen. But what would be more probable is that we head down lower into this consolidation area where we seek reaction from buyers and sellers, in which then you might see consolidation again. Or if you come back up here, maybe we see consolidation again, because these are the area where price is shifting and where lots of volume is being transacted. Because simply, I just want to take a look at this area. Yeah, take a look at that. If we look at this overall range, the most volume has been transacted in this choppy area. Choppy areas typically are the areas with lots of volume, because that's where buyers and sellers are in the most unison. So when it is diverged, we typically can head back into these areas, especially if there's a zone or liquidity at these areas. And simply due to the fact that we had a 1 hour zone there, we had liquidity there and even down here that are main liquidity, that provides us good targets into where price may sell off into. And that's honestly exactly what happened. We had our selling buys from that. Price started falling downwards. And because of that quick reaction with strength and momentum, which can simply be demonstrated by these candles, like right here and throughout this down move, you can simply see the momentum. That puts us into a good position to have a clear selling bias until at least this zone, or perhaps this main liquidity. And we have to see a reaction there. These could easily get invalidated and price could continue lower. So our job is to essentially just see how price reacts at these levels, which we can do in much greater depth and objectivity using order flow. So that was essentially the overall set of technical analysis and the overall structure that allowed me to take these two trades. NQ was essentially the same in terms of analysis. We saw price come up here to the zone, started pushing down. Now we're trying to see and want to come back towards the consolidation area, which is exactly what we did. So now that we've talked about the buys, let's work through the things. First, let's go throughout the entire market session from market open to around that 10:30 time CST. And throughout that, we'll explain these two trades that we have taken here and here as well. So let's dive straight into that. And as you see here at 8:48, this is 1 hour ahead because it's Eastern time. We simply see that price has been falling here. Now, we do know that we can catch a retracement play if there's clear confluence, clear absorption. We can continue aiming for the downside. So the clear points that I'm looking to see where there was a retracement was likely here, and that was likely the only trade that we potentially may have missed. So let's go down time by time and see if there was anything that we may have missed. I'm looking for retracement into barrier. to see if there's anything there. And not seeing anything there, we just continue to go down. Moving forward, we're still continuing to go down. Potentially something here, because what I see there is that as we come up into this passive selling, and we see 910 selling icebergs, which is quite significant. So I want to go back there and see if there's anything we may have potentially missed out on. Okay, already we're seeing 500 selling icebergs. I'm gonna speed it up just to see. Okay, yeah, so we're seeing that heavy icebergs come in here at these highs. And selling momentum is happening, and that's right around 850, I guess. I'm taking a look at what happened there. 850. So the 850 and 855 candles are what I'm looking at right here. And from there, okay, I'm trying to find the exact point where price flushed up and went back down. Okay, yeah, it's unlikely that we would have taken that trade, because as you saw there, if you just move back 5 seconds, 946 buy orders got spoofed in the market, and if those would have stayed, we could have bounced from here, pushed up likely until there. So no shorts that would have been taken there simply because of that factor. And additionally, where can price target other than 6050? Potentially we could have taken that trade, but in overall mindset, that trade would not have been optimal, simply with a risk to reward mindset alongside simple order flow. Additionally, nothing much here on the footprint at all that I'm noticing that demonstrated to me that seller continuation would occur at that area. So let's keep going. This candle down. Now we're just chopping, but still heading down. We're just moving down. What I want to see, and what has been the staple of a majority and essentially all of my retracement plays, is the fact that I want to see a retracement into a bookmap level, that we see a reaction that allows the trade to play out, and we haven't seen any of that so far. These levels have all been targets for the time being, because we do have a selling bias. But there has been no area of optimal entry that would have allowed us to take these shorts. So we're seeing the shorts happen. There's nothing that we actually see that is telling us to enter in. So let's keep going. What we see happening here is that price is continuing to go down. Nothing that we saw yet, but here is where things start to get interesting. Take a look here, okay? What do we see? 66 sell icebergs. Nothing too significant, but is a factor. Additionally, we do have this selling barrier here on the upside. So I'm looking to see how price reacts at that area. And as you can see, price is making a move down after that. And that results in this flush down. Now you may be wondering, that barrier was so small. How could you have known to take a short? Well, there's multiple things that goes into this, right? We have that selling bias. We know that price may want to head down to there. And we do want to target bookmap liquidity as a primary target. So what we saw happening was that as we started making this retracement, we noticed that we are entering into a passive selling barrier. Now, at that barrier, there's also 66 selling icebergs around that relative area. Now, we start to see price start to follow through. That's good. And our target, where would our target be? It would be in this zone for the time being, in this Bookmap magnet. And all of that is great, but that doesn't really confirm anything, right? Simply because of the fact that this barrier was so small. The thing that truly solidified this trade was this. Take a look at these two candles here on the footprint, and take a look and tell me what you notice about these candles. And honestly, overall, what has been happening so far? We're coming up here. As we come up into that relative barrier location, first here in this candle, 1,000 contracts are being traded here. Large buyer delta near the top, price is unable to break through. That continues into this candle where we see even more, and when that barrier here on Bookmap actually confirms that, right? We see a lot of volume being transacted here at these highs, especially buyers. You can see the buyer delta, and it's unable to push through. Once we started seeing this initial selling flush come in, that provided us with more than enough confidence to enter into the shorts, targeting at least this lower level right there. Now, if you take a look at the liquidity as well, right? There is liquidity here at 6062 towards the upside. But do you really think that just simply from this area we're going to head all the way up there? You can simply understand that as well, right? Because here at 910, although we did have selling delta here at this level, majority of the volume was transacted in the middle, showcasing to me that price was just having a battle between buyers and sellers. Nothing too significant that actually told me that price will reverse. What told me that price will continue selling off, though, was that as we came up into this area, we tapped into here, major buyer absorption and clearly visible buyer absorption that had followed through with aggression that truly solidified the trade idea. Now, this has stacked liquidity, and that stacked liquidity is greater than this. So I would, again, lean towards the downside, and my bias will lean towards the downside as well, which did validate this trade. Looking in hindsight, this trade was not such of an A+ setup, simply because of the fact that this liquidity was there at the top, and this was close by. I would have potentially liked us to retrace into a higher barrier, potentially if 6055 was the strength of this barrier, and then this barrier was more extended and we saw a bigger battle. That likely would have increased the confidence. But when we see our factors and confidences align, we do want to enter into those trades and not be fearful and not let our psychology get in the way. We entered and it happened to pay off, as you can see. We entered right on when we saw that reaction here at that 4-6-ish levels, right around here. And we placed our stop above that relative barrier around 5-1-ish, around this absorption here, right around 501.5, because we saw that there as well. That's where we placed our stop. And where did we target? Well, simply because this was such stacked liquidity here at these lows, we did place our TP right in the center of it. Looking through momentum, it did look like we can go through, and we targeted something that was inside of the liquidity, not at both the bottom. Simply because it's stacked and stacked with equilibrium, we just want to make sure that it is inside that stack. And it's better to be towards the upper side of the stack rather than the lower side. And that's what we did. Got out right at 6041, giving us a nice 1.1 risk reward trade, which, as I said again, it's okay, not the best, but it did happen to play out in our favor. It's, I would say, a B or C setup if we're grading like school. But this next trade would have likely been an A plus setup because risk to reward is great and overall confluences are great as well. So this actually happened pretty quickly after this flushed down. What we saw happening was that price broke down, and what happened to this stack liquidity? It essentially flipped. Now that we have broken all those passive buyers, we retraced, and that area had turned into a passive selling significance. And simply because it changed from buyers to sellers, and we see that happening with the footprint as well, right? At that area, we're seeing heavy selling volume and delta here at this area that pushed through all this stack liquidity there. We saw that stack liquidity get broken in real time, and lots of sellers got in at that area, pushing price down lower. Now, it's likely that these sellers, large participant sellers, these are not your average retail trader. These are likely big institutions and hedge firms. Those sellers are likely protecting their position by placing additional liquidity at that area. This allows them to not only get another entry at their original area, but also protect their position. So lots of passive sellers here at this area, which is a flip of this. That shows us that there is now a large selling confluence and a factor that shifts the market sentiment back to selling once again. So we see price head back up into this area, right? And that's right around 930-ish. And we enter around 935 candle. And I'll show you exactly why. We come into this area, right? As you can see here. And what we saw around this relative area, we saw price enter into that area. And then what we saw happening was mainly in this 935 candle right here. Price started pushing up and we had large amounts of volume near the top. This candle showed clear buyer absorption. You can clearly visualize it here. And you see large buying delta here. And if you look here, a big stacked selling delta happened here. And that aligns with this passive selling barrier that we're seeing here. Now, right around that relative stacked area of sellers, buyers tried to get in, and buyers were pretty strong here at this level, but they were unable to break through, and now price started wicking back down. That had signified to me that selling may want to come in. And because I noticed that right around this area right here, right when he tapped into it once again, right here, somewhere around there, we would have found our entry. We got a good entry simply because we saw that absorption. I saw price come down from that absorption, provided us with the good confluence to enter short. Now, this was tough, right? Because Bookmap liquidity, it was around a bit above, around 6041-ish. Now, if we kept it around 6041, our stop, we would have got stopped out by a few ticks, right? But what we did was because this was kind of stacked as well, right? We found more specificity using this delta right here. So we placed our stop at the upper end of this delta around 42.5, I believe. Yep, right at 6042.5 above the stacked seller delta. And we were one tick away from getting stopped out because we saw a random splurge of volatility suddenly enter the market. We saw price splurge up there, which quickly shifted into a sell-off that went straight into our take profit, which happened to be this lower liquidity area right around 6025. And it was 6024 because we underestimate where the liquidity is. 6026. 6024 is under, so it's 6026, correct? And that was essentially the reasoning behind both our trades for the day. First trade, both of these are great examples of the V2 trading retracement model. Essentially what I was explaining was that as price comes up into Bookmap barrier, and I'm explaining the retracement model, right? We see that absorption at that barrier. And what that is was essentially where these buyers were trying to push price higher, but they were unable to because of these passive sellers that were sitting there. Now, buyers are essentially getting exhausted, and because those buyers stopped trying to push through that area and sellers were defending that area, buyers had stopped, and they haven't got stopped out yet, but they have stopped entering into the market with such momentum, and now sellers have started to come in, which is then that reaction off that barrier that is essentially showing us that buyers were exhausted here, and there's definitive evidence of that through that absorption that we saw. And now that we've been making a reaction, that shows us that sellers may now be in control. And if sellers continue to push price lower, all these buyers may get stopped out, which then acts as further momentum pushing price lower. And that's essentially how these retracement models play out. Sellers or buyers are not hunting for stop losses. They are not doing any of that. They're essentially trying to allow and continue to push the market to head to where they want to. And they do this through their barriers and liquidity, not simply because of those stops. And that's what I want to highlight. The same happened for both of these trades, and that's what has allowed these two trades to play out so nicely. And as we had with our buys for the day as well, right after, we head down straight into our main liquidity level because we did not have much reaction off of our zone. You can see that play out here. We come down into our liquidity area, and by then it's already 10-ish. Now we can see a reaction, we can look for a reaction down at this area, potentially a retracement or a reversal play at the area. And looking at what we saw, there is not a retracement, or a reversal model at all. I'm not really noticing any seller absorption. I'm just seeing aggressive selling and now aggressive buying, quick shift. And to take a long, we must have a target here at the upside, which we do not have. So nothing telling us to go long yet. As we keep moving forward, I'm not seeing much at all that would help us continue drive us to the upside. Potentially if we head down here and then we see a clear target near VWAP, potentially that could work out. And it does seem to have worked out, but the spread of liquidity has not been as keenative as we would have wanted, because since that retracement, we would have likely wanted to see a retracement play, which could have been confusing given that the spread of liquidity on Bookmap has cleared up too much. We want it to be decently clear, but we don't want it to be too clear. We want that sweet spot, but here it looks to be too clear. I would always want to see some area where we can retrace into in terms of barrier, in which we can head towards this area. And simply because we don't see that, we don't enter into any trades, marking the fact that I think that we caught the two best trades that we could have here on Friday. We potentially could have avoided this trade to maximize our risk to reward using a higher probability setup like the second one, but I'm not mad about this trade at all. Potentially we need to wait for a more significant barrier to form, but we found that barrier form, we saw absorption on footprint, and price followed through with our plan and buys. So I wouldn't jot it down as a bad trade. I would just look for potential higher RR. But this trade presented itself. We took both of these trades, and I'm not mad about that at all. But that's essentially all I got here for today's market analysis and trade recap session. If you have any questions, please feel free to join the Discord. The link is in the description down below. There are many resources, all for completely free, that I think you may gain a thing or two out of. Additionally, feel free to leave a comment down below as well. I'll be sure to answer your questions there as well. Additionally, if you want to take advantage of the tools that I've been using, the order flow tools like Footprint and Bookmap, those have been linked in the description down as well. That's all I have here for today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for likely an educational video and a pre-week analysis that includes the pre-day analysis of Monday. So I'm excited to see you guys there, and I guess I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.